I'm Samantha, and I'm wanting to officially welcome Jayne Ann Krentz back to our virtual book club with Fresh Fiction. Jayne, it's so good to see you again.
Oh, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this.
Well, we always love having you join us, and we always find that we have so much to talk about. For one thing, I've been reading you forever under just about all of your pseudonyms. I think I first discovered you with Jane Castle and all of the paranormals back with Amaryllis. And then, of course, loved you as Amanda Quick and all of those one word titles, Rendezvous. Beautiful covers. And then I was shocked to realize, wait a second, that's the same person, commonly known as Jayne Ann Krentz, who I also had all of your different contemporary books and suspense. And of course, tonight we're going to be talking about your latest novel, The Night Island, which is part of the Lost Night Files trilogy. So let's go again, back all the way to the beginning, now that I've gushed a little bit, shown my fandom here. But for some of our new readers, can you tell us about how you first got started writing? Because I know you've had a journey and you didn't just instantly start publishing.
No, back in those days, there was no alternative really to New York. It was either find a New York publisher or there's no way to do it. No, in the days before ebooks, the days before self-publishing, the days before Kindle. That's how old I am. But the romance market had suddenly kicked in big time. It was just one of those right place at the right time. I had been trying to write for 6 years, getting rejection after rejection after rejection for 6 years. And then the market sort of opened up. And I was standing on the right street corner at the right time, I guess, after 6 years. It's a long time to wait for the right bus, but I did. In the course of that, I managed to acquire a lot of pen names. The business was odd in that people take pen names for different reasons. One of them is because they think they're going to write something very different and they don't want to confuse their readers. Other times it's because they've killed off a career with bad sales. And that was what happened with me. And when you do that back in those days where the sales records can make it impossible to get a new contract, I had to change my name a few times. I do not recommend it. If there are any aspiring writers or working writers out there who are thinking of taking a pen name, really think twice about it, because in this day and age, you just can't build too many brands. Nobody's going to remember. Trust me. If I am autographing and the line, I can guarantee that every fifth person in that line will say, "Oh, I didn't know you wrote as blah, blah, blah." They just don't remember it. And I'm as bad as everybody else. It's hard to maintain that kind of, it's hard enough to remember an author's name, let alone that they have 3 of them. So yeah, my one word of advice tonight is don't do the multiple pen names thing. In hindsight, it has served me well in one respect. It's because my readers have come to know which of my 3 worlds they're going to get when they pick up a book. So, I mean, you as a reader can speak to that, but I have heard people say that when they're in the mood for historical, they know to go to Amanda Quick. When they're in the mood for a futuristic, they know to go to Jane Castle, and then Krentz for the contemporary. And for what it's worth, Jane Castle is my real name.
Well, and one of the things that I've loved also with your books, and as the stories have evolved over time, is how you have intermingled the different aspects between the 3, and that you've had some arcs where it has jumped between each of the different names.
As my editor said a couple of years ago, she said, "Well, you accidentally created a Jane verse." And I think every author does that to some extent. And you spend your career exploring that universe that you are creating. I will say that I think every author has a core story. And if you don't respond to an author's core story or their voice, you're probably not going to go back to that author again and again. My core story has always dealt with reinvention. My characters are always in the process of reinventing themselves. And it's always based, the conflicts are almost always on trust, revolve around the risk of trust. I think it's the biggest risk any of us take, and we take it every day. And I just find that risk particularly fascinating as an author. And then you know my voice. And if you don't like it, you're not gonna like it. It's just every author has a storytelling voice.
Mhm.
And I don't know, what do you look for? Do you even notice it? You notice it if you don't like it. Maybe that's how it works. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or you forget it if it's boring.
And
But
sometimes
but
isn't that even a worse fate? If
yeah, yeah,
really think about it?
being boring is your worst nightmare. As an author, you want them to love you or hate you, but not forget you. I will say that I write with a humorous angle, a light kind of angle. And humor is high risk in an author, because we all respond to the dark emotions, you know, horror or panic or fear or sadness, you know, all those, everybody responds to that strongly, but humor is a crapshoot.
True. Well, and when you were talking about trust, also, I mean, that resonates. And I'm thinking of so many of your stories where that was such a key element with the different relationships. And I think the other element of the stories that also spread out, no matter which title you're writing under, is that they all have a romantic suspense element.
Yes. I can't write
What,
without a murder. I don't know.
what is
I
it
don't know.
about that that's so appealing to you? So that that has become one of your really known genres, despite
Well, I grew up on
paranormal
Nancy
or whatever.
Drew.
Mhm.
I grew up on Nancy Drew, so I was probably doomed to write suspense of some kind or another. But I think romantic suspense is its own genre. It's not romance with a light mystery thrown in on the side, and it's not suspense with a romantic element. And the way you can tell the difference is if you can pull either one out and still have a coherent story left, you've either got suspense or you've got romance. But with romantic suspense, it would fall apart because both elements are so intertwined. Every twist in the suspense ignites a twist in the romance, and every twist in the romance changes something in the suspense. And that's romantic suspense. And ultimately, it's kind of I don't want to say buddy story, but if it's two people who have to overcome their issues to work together in order to survive, because on their own, neither one of them is going to make it. And I guess that's the core part of the romance for me. And then the suspense heightens the stakes in the romance, and the romance heightens the stakes in the suspense.
Well, one of the things, because I was looking back at some of our past interviews and discussions, and I had a book on my shelf actually. It was The Storytellers that had been edited by Mark Rubenstein. And you had your own entire section in here. And so I was flipping through and I'm like, okay, wait a second. And one of the questions was talking about how you write erotic scenes. But what really intrigued me out of your answer that I wanted to expand on a little bit was that you compared writing the erotic scenes to writing your violence scenes, and that you saw them very much analogous and intertwined, and that they have to advance the plot.
Yeah.
And it was really one of the more important parts sometimes of your stories. Can you expand on that?
Well,
Going
I
way
think,
back to however long this interview was, right?
yeah, yeah, the interview was years ago, but I haven't really changed my opinion particularly. Um, it's writing the emotion of the romance is the most important part, not the sex, but the emotional reaction to it, obviously. Just like the murder is on its own not interesting until we know who was affected by the murder and who got killed, and we, you know, all the sympathy for the victim, and you know, the chase after the bag, all the emotional content is what matters in the storytelling and the violence. And that's the same with the romance. It's the emotional content that you're reading for. And I'm a dialogue driven writer, so a lot of my characters do a lot of chatting. Put it that and for me, that's where the real tension lies, is in their communication. their verbal communication.
And being a dialogue writer, going back to your mentions of the difficulty of writing humor earlier too, does the dialogue aspect make the humor easier to get across versus having it action driven?
Yeah, I like, I just like dialogue for it. It tells, for me, the characters don't really come alive until I have them start talking to each other on the page. And that's when I discover them. And I think that's when the reader discovers them. We learn this at the same time. And I think that other, every writer, I think, leans heavily toward a gift for narrative and description, or a gift for dialogue. We seem to fall into those two, one of those two. Most people who write will tell you they initially lean one way or the other, and then they have to add the other in because you can't write without the other. But I definitely lean toward the talk, the dialogue, and that's where most of the emotion comes down. And as I've gotten, as I've written more and more over the years, I find myself relying less on the description of their reaction and more on letting their words convey the reactions. And sometimes that works for me, but it doesn't work for the reader. Sometimes they need more description of the reaction. I totally get that, but that's kind of how I lean.
And how does that then come across your day-to-day writing process? So are you writing essentially that dialogue first and it's just conversation, conversation, conversation? You have to go back and add the descriptions or the actions, or does it all kind of intermix naturally?
It kind of intermixes naturally, but if if I make if I err on one side, it's going to be that things get too chatty at a time when there should be more action, because I don't really do action scenes all that well. To tell you the truth, it's not my forte. Mostly because I can't. I think it's a gift to be able to write good action scenes, and I think the people who do it best see their books more as a cinematic storyline, as a movie. They're more visual than I am. I'm not a visual person. And therefore I don't see my scenes visually very well. And it's very hard for me to slow down and figure out how to get the car door open, how to, how to load the gun. I was like, oh, that kind of thing. Whereas other people, that's their forte. They can deliver that. And I think it's the difference between seeing the movie or hearing it in your head.
Mm.
I hear it.
Hmm. And so with that, what about when ideas are coming to you? And first, I'm guessing then you're hearing those conversations. Do you write them down immediately? Do you make various notes? Is it like, hey, this is a great conversation for this book? Or, oh, no, okay, no, this isn't for these characters. I need to save this for my next historical or the next book in this trilogy. Or how do you capture some of that?
I can't walk and chew gum at the same time. So when I'm working on a book, that's the only thing I'm focused on. And I'm totally obsessed with that story. I don't think about, oh, I'll save this for the futuristic or the historical. It's just, I've got to make this book work. And all I care about is making this story work. And that's how I go into it. So no, I'm not thinking about saving it for the next one. I worry sometimes that if I use up all the good ideas in this one, I won't have any for the next one. But that's never happened. I mean, I'm not saying they're all great ideas, but for me, they were, I haven't ever had a shortage of ideas, good or bad. I still get them. I guess you would stop writing if you stopped getting the ideas. I guess that would be the sign that you're ready to move on to some other passion.
Mhm. Well, and you said this was really, and when you're working on a book that you become obsessed with it. And I think in previously you've also talked that writing is a compulsion for you or an addiction, which,
Yeah.
like you said, if you no longer have those ideas, you can just walk away and move on to something else. I don't get the sense that's going to be happening to you. So, other than actually just getting it on the page, how do you deal with that compulsion or when you are obsessed? Is it that you are then working nonstop? Do you consciously set certain breaks of, okay, I need to stop at this time so I can move on? And what happens if you can't, for whatever reason, sit in front of a screen and start capturing your ideas?
Yeah, that would be very frustrating. I always, if I travel or I'm away from home or away from the screen, and for some reason, I've always got a notebook with me
Mhm.
and a pen. So I'm never without that. But for the rest of it, I've been doing this a long time now, as you has observed, and I had to set some rules for myself years ago. One of which is I am married. I do have a relationship I have to take care of. Um, and that means, quit at dinner time. And, if I were living alone, if I were on my own, I would probably go on and off all day long and into the night. But I don't think that's good for a relationship. It's toward the end of a book, it happens, but for the other 3 months of writing the book, I can't let that happen. So you do have to find the balance.
And one of the things I found with you also is that you do read even when you're writing.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So
I
many
know.
authors, sometimes they want to read, but they don't want to cross mix or find those distractions. What are you reading now? And do you find that as a distraction, or is it more of a saving grace?
No, it's not it's a distraction in the sense that it's downtime. I mean, it's a relaxation time, and I give myself that as much as I can. Um, as for what I'm reading now, I just finished The Curse of Penrith Hall by Jess Armstrong, which is an interesting Gothic. I like Gothic,
You're
and I
still in
like,
the Gothic, huh?
yeah, I really there's I'm almost kind of moving from Gothic into horror light. I'm not interested in straight up horror, but what I think of as horror light is really the Gothic.
Mhm.
And I do love the Gothic. I mean, who doesn't? And Nalini Singh just did one. There should have been 8.
I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah, that's her latest, and it's a true Gothic too. And it is its own thing. It relies on that question of a heroine who questions her sanity. Am I seeing things?
Mhm.
Who can I trust? It relies on that isolated remote location, so you just can't call 911. And it relies on the notion that the threat is from within, like literally within the house often. The ghost down the hall kind of thing. The threat is from within, not thrillers from terrorists from abroad or bad guys trying to get at you, but who can I trust? And those 3 elements, and it almost always I think works best when it features a female lead. That's the way I like it. But those 3 elements create a very intimate kind of suspense. And it's just classic. It's probably my favorite form of romantic suspense.
And I want to say that last time we talked, you were also talking about the Murderbot series. Do I
Oh,
remember that
yeah,
correctly?
yeah, yeah. It's great. It's hard to describe. Basically, it's a Martha Wells is the author, and I highly recommend it. The Murderbot is a robot that looks very humanoid, and he has overridden his controller, whatever whatever makes it a robot, and he's in the process of becoming sentient, and that means he's in the process of figuring out emotions, and he's absolutely addicted to serials, television serials, soap operas, long running soap operas. And it's a great little, each book is a great little mystery to go along with it. Highly recommended. The Murderbot Diaries, I think, is the name of the
And
series.
one of the things one of our other readers was talking about for that series is that she was really intrigued because it was more of a series of short novellas as opposed to more full-length novels.
Yeah, I think
What
that's
your thought was on that?
well, I think it's a function of the fact that she's coming out of science fiction fantasy, which does have a novella history of novellas, as well as the super long books, the huge long world building books. But the novella has become, I think, more popular in the in the science fiction world. I'm not an expert on it, so I can't say it, but it seems to be something you'll see that more than you will in the romance market or straight up mystery market, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah, it makes it more expensive. I mean, as a purchase, because each book is going to command full, even though they're slender volumes, you're paying full price, or almost full price, but sooner or later everything comes on sale.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Or
let's get,
the library.
of course, always a big fan of the libraries. I
Yes.
mean, no question. That's how I've been introduced to so many different authors and series. But coming back to your books, let's talk a little bit about The Night Island. And what was the favorite thing for you about writing Talia and Luke's story?
Um, well, the the Lost Night Files series. This is the second book in the series. And each book, I emphasize each book is a standalone mystery, but there's a cast of characters that you'll come to know throughout the three books. And I think my favorite element is writing characters who are suddenly stuck with paranormal attributes, paranormal powers, and they have no idea how to handle them. They're worried about them. It scares them to death because it's like, am I going crazy? Do I really hear things? Do I really see these things? And that confusion about dealing with it, I think, sort of is a stand-in for all of us asking questions our whole lives. What am I doing here? How does this work? How do I keep going? How do I adjust? And so the conflicts in that story, in addition to just solving the mystery, the psychic conflicts are fun for me. And this book also tapped into elements that I had developed in the previous series, the Fog Lake series, which is the mysterious old Bluestone project, a government project from the 20th century, mid-20th century, government project designed to investigate psychic phenomena and paranormal powers. And I always get such a kick out of that because it's hard to believe, I think, that the US government and Russia and others poured tons of money, millions and millions of dollars into paranormal research.
Mhm.
It was every government that could afford it was doing it. I think that's so funny. I don't know why. It's like your tax dollars at work. We're gonna create psychic spies. Sure
Oh,
you
yeah.
are.
Well, and it's the same thing I mean, just within the last couple of years about how all the UFO sightings have all made the news and congressional hearings again. And it's like,
Yeah,
seriously? Really?
you're wasting time on this. Oh my God, you're wasting money on this. I know, it's hilarious. It's just, I can't resist the humor of it. It's like, and it makes for great plots.
That's true. Well, and okay, kind of went over. I want to get in a couple of our fresh fiction fact questions. You're not going to be completely off the hook with this, but one of our new ones that we added, because I don't want to repeat with you, but if you knew that it was real, which would you rather see? And if, again, keeping in mind with a lot of your writings, would you rather see a ghost or an alien?
I'd rather see an alien, because fundamentally I don't believe in ghosts in the sense that the after world ever touches our world in that way. That would be infinitely more disturbing in for me. That would be more earth-shaking, I guess. The aliens I sort of think are out there. It's just a question of when and where we encounter them. I think life exists on a lot of other places. It may just be bacteria, but sooner or later that bacteria life just finds a way, and that's wherever it lands. And so that would not be the biggest surprise in the world. Might be scary, but it wouldn't be surprising. But ghosts go into another kind of supernatural that I'm not drawn to. When I say I write the paranormal, I always like to emphasize that I don't do the supernatural. I don't do vampires or werewolves or magic or witchcraft. I can read those books and thoroughly enjoy them, don't get me wrong, but they're not part of my core story. So I can't write them convincingly. So for me, the paranormal is more like one step beyond intuition. And I think everybody thinks they've got intuition. In fact, most of us say, well, sooner or later in life, who hasn't said, I wish I'd listened to my intuition. I knew I shouldn't have married the guy. Or I wish I hadn't let that one go. Yeah, it's just, I think people can identify with intuition, and my characters are just like one step beyond that.
Yeah, that element, and then being able to manifest sometimes that energy, depending again on which.
And I do believe in energy. I think there's energy out there that we don't really have an explanation for or a name for. Think of music. How could that instrument playing on the stage change your mental mood? And think about it. It does. It can stir you up. It can bring you down. It can make you sad. And yet nothing is touching you. Nothing. You're not taking any medicine. It's just sound, which has no emotional content. And yet somehow when it strikes you, it does have emotional content. So, and how many people in our life have we said, they just bring you down? I don't want to be around them. They're just vampires. They're emotional vampires, or they're always depressed, or they're always in a bad mood. That's energy. And we try to avoid it. Most of us go out of our way to avoid the bad energy people because it bothers us. We react to it. So I do think there is an argument for energies that don't yet have don't have good definitions yet, or for which we can't measure them well. I have a way of really measuring them. So that's
what kind of song or music is it for you that is one of your go-to songs when you want that pickup?
I like fast, and I like rock and roll. The Eagles, Hotel California. I like this afternoon before the show, I was listening to Simply Irresistible. I just like with a beat, something you could dance to.
When it comes on, do you actually get up and?
It makes me tap my toes. Yeah, it makes me want to move. It lifts me. It gives me a energy.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
With Jayne, I mean, what is the next? Of course, I mean, we just have, of course, The Night Island come out, but we're always interested in what's next.
Well, this is a year in which I have actually skipped the Amanda Quick book, which would normally come in May. And I took this year off, because I wanted to reconsider where to go next with Amanda Quick. If you remember, I had moved her into the 1930s, the late 1930s. And I was actually dealing with a very narrow range of time there, like 1937, 38, because I didn't want to go too far forward and get involved with the war. Yeah. And I didn't want to go too far back with the really downside of the Depression. But the 37, 38 year was Hollywood, California, the golden era, and lots of glamour on the West Coast, at any rate, lots of glamour. And it was a really interesting time for women because they were really coming out of the house, out of the home, and into the world. Think Amelia Earhart. She was the icon of the time at the time. Every woman wanted to be Amelia Earhart. That changed with World War II. It changed after World War II. When the men came home, everybody, quote unquote, wanted to get back to normal, even though normal had never existed. Everybody had a mental image of it. And so all the women who'd gone out into the world and were running the factories and everything else disappeared. And everything changed for women at that point. But in that 1937, 38 time slot, things were just opening up for women, and it's a very exciting time to write. But I've done 8 books there now, and I've kind of hit the walls. I need a new era. Bottom line is the May book has been changed out with my Jane Kessel title, People in Glass Houses.
Ooh,
That's a Dust Bunny book for those who
you
read.
know we love the dust bunnies. Yes.
A Dust Bunny book, and it's also my Gothic on harmony, my Gothic novel on harmony. So I hope people enjoy it.
Awesome. Well, you'll have to keep us posted on your decisions for Amanda Quick.
Yeah,
'Cause,
I will.
we definitely hit all the different eras with you there and do the different spins. So we'll be curious to see where you go next.
Okay, I'll keep you posted. You'll be the first to know.
So Jayne, with that, then where is the best place for our readers to stay in touch with you, find out the latest news, and keep in touch?
Well, the name is Jayne with a Y, Jayne Ann Krentz. And if you go JayneAnnKrentz.com, you'll hit my website. And if you get that far, I hope you'll sign up for my newsletter, because that's where most of the real breaking news is. But I'm also on Facebook, and I'm struggling with an Instagram page. I don't know. I gave up on TikTok, at least for now. I couldn't master TikTok. For those out there who are at ease with social media, it's hard for some of us. But the Facebook page is the most active one.
Awesome.
And most of the answers to the questions you're asking, like what other books have you written, or what are the series, what other series do you have? That's all on my website.
And it's a great resource to keep track of what are all the different books in those series, the right reading order, and discovering some of the books. Oh, I might have missed that one.
Yeah.
Out of all of your, what is it, 35 million copies in
Yeah.
print now? Somewhere around there. So there's a lot to read for people that might just be discovering.
Yeah. Sometimes I worry that it's overwhelming though. So that's why if you go there, you can find it sorted by series. And that kind of makes it more understandable, I guess, the lists and stuff. So,
Well, Jayne, thanks for joining us this evening to talk about the latest with the Night Island. But stick around for our happy hour and additional Q&A with some of our readers.
sounds good. Thank you so much.